Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's edition of Philosophy in the Forest. I am Shasta, and I am joining you from the beautiful rainforest in East Hawaii. Um, I want to welcome all you wonderful philosophers, truth seekers, to this discussion of aesthetic philosophy. Today, I'm going to talk about Martin Heidegger and his piece, Origin of the Work of Art. And the reason that I am talking about art is because there's something so interesting about the definition and nature of human creativity, the belief in creation and who the artist is. So Heidegger starts to delve into these ideas, the nature of creativity, in his book Origin of the Work of Art, and explains origin phenomenology as the source of an object's essence and nature of creativity. So the heart of Heidegger's theory is a belief that art, creation, and the artist are bound together in a cyclical partnership. So creativity, the final piece, and the individual who creates that are all a trinity, basically, a cyclical partnership that support each other. Art feeds the artist, and the artist nourishes the idea into fruition. So it's like an ouroboros. Art is the ouroboros. It's a cyclic, self-sustaining cycle, according to Heidegger, and that art cannot be separated from the process of imagination. It can't be separated from creation. And it can't actually be separated from the actual physical object that comes out of the artist, the actual art, the Mona Lisa, the entire Giza Strip. We can look at something like the Parthenon, multiple authors of this piece, but according to Heidegger, you can't separate something like the Parthenon from the inspiration to create it, the individuals, in the case of the Parthenon, who created it, and the piece itself. So it gets a little bit more ethereal than for Heidegger, because he begins to delve into art itself as it begins in the imagination. Art can't be separated from the process of imagination, creation, or the work of art. And works of art are actual physical things. A song, a wedding cake, an obelisk. Okay? Works of art actually are manifest in our physical reality. But they have a sort of ethereal presence that's beyond mere existence. Okay, I'm a Beatles fan. So for other people who are Beatles fans, we can think of our favorite Beatles song, because it's a work of art, and it has this presence about it. Or think of your favorite song. I also really like the song Run to the Hills by Iron Maiden. Okay? That song gives me a feeling. It's a work of art for me. And it is difficult to define, according to Heidegger. It's difficult to define art itself. I had talked before about aesthetic sensibility, but Heidegger is really talking about how art is connected to truth, and the truth behind what separates art from other objects is that art tells a story that brings the audience to an epiphany. So if I mention a work of art, for example, I'm thinking of the Indian city. It's called Havi. It's just this beautiful city. It was built thousands of years ago. Some of the wonderful, wonderful edifices that have been built all over Thailand, all over Cambodia, these works of art actually are designed to bring in the audience. I think architecture, to me, is the best example of art that is designed to convey ideas to audiences. Um, there are, even a Viking ship, for example, is a work of art. You know, and I will delve more into functional art when I talk about Dewey, but we're starting to get to this idea that art tells a story. Okay, so something I can think of specifically is a painting called The Wreck of the Medusa, and it's about a shipwreck. Okay, very obvious, telling a story, exposing a truth. Art exposes truth, and it allows people to learn new information about reality, what something might be like. And I think movies do a really great job of being a high form of art. Let's look at something like the Matrix trilogy. Definitely tells a story that brings an audience to an epiphany. Many people believe that the Matrix trilogy exposed truth and allowed people to learn new information about reality. So for Heidegger, that would be a work of art. Because the goal of art is to present ideas with sincerity and enable people to acquire new opinions about reality. So Heidegger describes the essence of creativity and explains the origin of art. And in his theory, the artist is the origin of the work of art. Because without the individual, or individuals, as I'm going to add to this, without the creator, there cannot be the art. Right? So without Da Vinci, there can be no Last Supper. No one else was going to paint the Last Supper but Da Vinci. And so the work of art, an artwork, it has a natural gestation process, just like the birth of a being. And the inspiration to create art enables the artist to create art. So again, there's that ouroboros, that cyclical process. The process of creation becomes difficult to discern what came first. So in this process, it is a thing where, what is it, the art or the artist? Can they be separated? To Heidegger, they really cannot. Although the artist is first, the art itself has to be channeled through a physical being, a person or group of people. Those retablas in Spain, they're these altarpieces. They were often created by masters, who would have apprentices who would create this art, right? But it came from the mind of the master, and the techniques come from people. People create art. Art involves a folding and an unfolding process. The artist investigates their ideas. And this is their method of design. Investigates dimension, perception, depth. Thinking of all these wonderful kind of authorless art pieces, ex-photo art of Mexico. Art that's created to signify some divine intervention, but it's these little blocks that are story blocks. Again, so born in the mind of the person is this inspiration, this event, this story. And the entire thing, from the moment that the seed of the art is planted in the artist, this in itself leads to this unveiling of information. The point of art is to convey information to an audience. And that this information should say something with passionate sincerity, bring the audience closer to this epiphany of truth. And I think a lot of devotional art gears towards, a deity, because the hope of that art is to bring the viewer towards the epiphany of devotion, you know, religious fervor. So, but the thing about art for Heidegger that's so difficult is that it's hard to define. The artist and the work are a two-headed beast. So whether or not the artist is inspired by a beautiful woman or someone they love or a beautiful man, or whether it's a sunset that inspires the artist, whether it's a negative feeling like the wreck of a ship, or whether an artist is expressing ideas about slavery or oppression or some of the shock art movements of the 90s. There's still this process of creation. So this creativity arises from these higher concepts, this inspiration to create a story and convey that idea. It's a craft that's born in the intellect, but the imagination sort of pulls or is inspired by a story. So, as someone who considers themselves a writer or an author, I'm biased. I may pull my stories, get inspiration for these stories from some kind of like outside concept, and then the story is channeled through my hands. Okay. But it's a part of life itself. So everything that we do in life, we have this opportunity to create and to create a story. So art is this educational tool that we have. It's something that we can use. And we have a visionary element to art because it belongs to our imagination. It's imaginative and it functions as a living thing. And I think it's very natural that things like motion pictures have come along, that we have the internet, that we have YouTube, that we have influencers creating content, because people are bringing and revealing their imagination to a community. So art continually takes the audience back into the artist. So without the audience, the art cannot exist. It functions as a living thing because it exists with the audience in constant flux, as we discussed how taste changes. Okay, so art reveals something about the artist and the community. It takes the audience back to the artist and back to the process of creation. It's that circle. The story of art and art itself it ignites the imagination to think about art, to think about creating. It's a teaching tool because to create, we must contemplate. Tell a story again. We must reveal information. And a lot of things can be called art because art is a part of our human experience. It's a part of daily life. It's this idea of delivering ideas into being and using ideas, telling a story with these ideas. Art for Heidegger is an allegory. It's a symbol. Okay? The artist shapes matter into forms. These forms inspire deep contemplation and open up new worlds. So art is a cycle between imagination, forms, and then those forms being received by an audience. So material items being received by an audience. And when the audience receives these items, it becomes a sort of conversation and creativity. So the artwork will stand on its own. And it doesn't actually need a statement at all because it's the actual reaction that the audience has to the art and the stories that the audience come up with themselves to make that thing, right? So we can go back to the Athenian Acropolis. Stone things came forth. They made these beautiful statues, these stone statues out of bronze and stone edifices, and they were prominent. And the people of Athens could look at the Acropolis and feel a shared story. So for Heidegger, art is just a thing that's made, but it's an allegory and a symbol. It's designed to tell a story. You know, so as this thing, it should be able to express itself honestly through its own existence. It should give the audience a chance to explore ideas. It's a fiction that explains facts. It's a work that unveils itself through the expression of material items in our physical world. There's actually, for this, and it's sort of like, it kind of becomes belligerent because it does reflect back onto itself. It is the world of form. It is a revelation of information about reality. So existence itself almost has this belligerence, and the artist is there like helping the audience to contemplate this phenomena, this wonderment, this belligerence. And to Heidegger, art happens because there's a need to express the essence of being in an understandable and clear way. So art has the power to engage an audience because it embraces these truths. Not just ideas about beauty, just simply ideas. The moment the artist has an idea, a revelation, that's the origin of art. The origin of the work of art, for Heidegger, is the imagination itself. The purpose of art is to explore truth, and art has the power to unveil novel and revolutionary ideas about the nature of reality. So thank you guys for joining me in this relatively long discussion about the nature of how an artist brings forth ideas into the material world, and how Heidegger comes to explain the phenomena of human creativity. Thank you for joining me, and aloha.